Hi everyone, and welcome to my next video tutorial, which will be on deploying a Django web app with Amazon EC2, Nginx, and G-Unicorn. Alright, so make sure that you're logged into your AWS account. So there is a prerequisite for this tutorial. You need to at least have some basic understanding of AWS, so make sure that you have some idea. The next thing that you need to ensure, of course, is that you're logged into your AWS account. Also, make sure that you have a repository that you want to clone, because we will be cloning a project here. So I have a sample project here, as you can see here, which I'll be cloning within our Amazon EC2 instance. So basically, you need a GitHub repo set and ready, and you also need to be signed into AWS. So make sure that you've got that set. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to head over to EC2. So you can type EC2 here. So for those of you that are wondering, so EC2 is probably the most popular service on AWS, which allows us to provision virtual servers in the cloud known as EC2 instances. So we can go ahead and click on EC2. Okay, so let's click on that. All right, so let's just wait for the dashboard to refresh itself. And the first thing that we want to do is create a security group. So a security group is basically a virtual firewall, okay, that consists of inbound rules and outbound rules. And these inbound and outbound rules determine how internet traffic is routed inward and outward in terms of security principles, okay, and what internet traffic is basically constrained to as well. All right, so let's go ahead and create our security group. So first of all, you want to give your security group a name. I'm going to call it MySG. And you'll want to add a description as well. It used to be optional, but now it's mandatory. So what I do here is I just put it in again, my security group name. So go ahead and add in your security group name. In the description, you can add anything that you want. And of course, a bit more information here about our security group. So as I said, it's a virtual firewall for our EC2 instance, and it will control inbound and outbound traffic. Great, so let's scroll down. So as you can see here, we have our inbound and outbound rules. Now the outbound rules is of course correlating to traffic going outward. Now this should be all traffic. It wouldn't make sense to have strict rules on this unless we're working with a VPS or making use of anything, well, with a private VPC, etc. So let's just leave this as is. All right, so in terms of the inbound rules, we need to set up 3 inbound rules. So the first inbound rule is going to be based on SSH. So let's look for SSH. Okay, and SSH is going to operate under port 22, and we want to allow IPv4 addresses to connect to SSH on port 22, and IPv4 addresses are designated by the following CIDR block. So essentially, this is going to allow us to SSH, as the term is called, into our EC2 instances. So we will be able to programmatically access our servers by using SSH. So this is very important, so make sure you have this connected. Next, you want to add a rule called HTTP. So the rule is going to be based on the type of HTTP. And we're going to actually add 2 of them, and I'll explain now why. Okay, so we need 2 inbound rules here for HTTP, and HTTP operates under port 80, and we want to allow inbound traffic from all IPv4 addresses, which is designated by the following CIDR block, and from all IPv6 addresses, which is designated by the following CIDR block. Okay, so we call these here IPv4 and IPv6 addresses, and it's in a format known as a CIDR block. Okay, and basically, like I said, we want to connect to our application on HTTP on port 80 from either an IPv4 or an IPv6 address, and we want to programmatically access our EC2 instance. So essentially, we want to SSH into our instance and configure it with SSH on port 22 from our IPv4 address. Okay, so make sure you've got these 3 inbound rules set and ready to go. And also double check that your security group name is in place along with the description. This is mandatory. And that's all you need. So make sure you've configured everything. And once you're happy with that, you can scroll down and say create security group. Okay, there we go. So our security group is created. Now, for those of you that don't have great memory, I'd recommend just writing this down. So it depends what you called your security group. I just called it MySG, so it will be quite easy to remember. So make sure you know your security group. Great. So we can now head on back to the EC2 dashboard. And what we want to do now is create our first EC2 instance. So here we have instances running, and that is 0. So we can go ahead and click on instances. Okay. And here on the right, you can see an orange button here that says launch instances. So you want to go ahead and click launch instances. Okay, it just takes a moment, excuse me. And let's get started. So first of all, you want to name your server. So I'm going to call this my server. I'm going to keep it very simple, very easy. So I'm just going to call it my server. Next, we need to choose a base OS image or an AMI or Amazon Machine image. So this is our operating system essentially. And we're going to use Ubuntu. So make sure you don't use anything else. Make sure you use Ubuntu because of the configurations that I'll show you soon enough. And we're going to use the free tier eligible. So Ubuntu, the version 22.04 LTS long-term support. Then you can scroll down and under instance type, you want to choose T2 micro, which is on the free tier eligible. So it will automatically be selected for you. You just have to double check. All right, next we want to scroll down and here under key pair, we don't want to log in with a key pair for now. So we're just going to click here and say proceed without a key pair. We don't need to do this because I'll show you a better way of SSHing into our EC2 instance. Next, you want to scroll down and here under firewall security groups, we don't need to create one because we just configured a security group. So you can say select existing security group. And here you want to select your security group. And the one that I created just now was called MySG. So select your security group and you can scroll all the way down. And here on the right here under summary, you just want to check everything and make sure. So we are creating an EC2 instance that makes use of the Ubuntu AMI or base OS image. We are using the T2 micro virtual server type or instance type. The firewall is MySG. And that's the main things that you need to bear in mind. So once you're happy with that, you can go ahead and say launch instance. Okay, so it's just launch your instance. There we go. Instance has been launched. You can click on instances now. Okay, and I have mine pending, so don't worry about the one from earlier. I was just doing some testing, so here's the one that we are waiting for. So it's currently pending. So let's wait for it to turn into the running state. That should be fast. And then what I'm going to have to do is once it's in the running state, oh, there we go. So here is our server as of this moment. So it's running, but the status checks are still initializing. Now, you can skip ahead and move on, but I would advise you to wait until the status checks have been passed. So you'll see here 2 out of 2 with a green check mark saying that it has passed. Okay, so we want to make sure that our instance is completely configured without any issues. So I'd recommend just waiting for about 5 to 10 minutes until the status check is passed. And once it's been completed, I'll show you what it looks like once it's done, and then we can move on with the next set of steps. So make sure that you've got this all set and into place, and then we'll move on to the next steps. All right, so let's just wait for the status check. Right, so you should now see here, if you refresh your dashboard here, you should see now that the status checks have now been passed, 2 out of 2, and that your instance is still running, which is great. So what we want to do now is just click on the check mark here for our instance, and we just want to just double check everything's okay. So we're using the Ubuntu platform. Our AMI is based on Ubuntu, the Ubuntu image. Great, that's it. So just double check that. Right, so now we can click on this instance ID here. Okay, and do bear in mind your public IPv4 address, but don't worry, you'll see this again soon once you connect. So we're now going to connect to our EC2 instance programmatically, you could say. So you can say connect. And we're going to make use of the Amazon EC2 Instance Connect service, and we can go ahead now and connect to our service. Okay. Now do bear in mind here that it opens another tab that it's going to connect to, but keep in mind your public IP address here. This is our IPv4 address, which we will connect to soon enough. Right, so we can now see that we are now connected to our EC2 instance. Now the reason that we're able to connect to it is because remember that inbound rule that we created early on, which was to allow us to SSH on port 22. Okay, EC2 Instance Connect works based on that SSH inbound rule that we configured. So now we have access to our EC2 instance. Now do keep in mind that the other 2 inbound rules that we defined, okay, will allow our users to connect to our application itself on port 80 via IPv4 and IPv6 addresses. Okay, so I just wanted to make that a bit clearer. Great, so I'm going to say clear, and I just want to zoom in a bit here for you guys. That should do. Okay, so just a few commands here. So if you say clear, that's just of course going to clear the console. Usually I type CLS, but since we are making use of Linux, we need to say clear. Okay, maybe I can zoom in a bit more. That might be better. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to obtain information about the latest package versions that are available for our Ubuntu system. So what you want to do is type in sudo space apt -get update. Okay, so we want to see all the available updates available. Okay, so let's see. So it's just reading for us. Done. Okay, so everything has been transcribed. The next thing that we want to do is download and upgrade all of these available packages. So I'm just going to type clear, and here I'm going to say sudo space apt -get upgrade. So now we're actually going to upgrade our system, and what you want to do, just want to zoom out here, what you want to do now is you just want to press yes, so that will be designated by a Y, and you can press enter. So now it's going to install and set everything up. Now you will see a few prompts will come up here about the daemon being updated or upgraded, so don't worry about that, I will explain in a moment. So there we go. Now you'll see this prompt a few times, so saying daemons using outdated libraries, so you don't need to worry too much about this. All you need to do is press enter on your keyboard. Now you're going to see this a few times. All you need to do is press enter on your keyboard. You don't need to do anything, just press enter. That's all you need to do. Okay, perfect. So that's all set up. Now let's type clear. And the next thing we want to do is just check the current Python version. So here I'm just going to say Python 3 -- version. Okay, Python 3.10.6, that's a pretty good Python version, quite stable. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is we want to create a virtual environment. So before we can do that, we need to install the Python 3 virtual environment package. So we're going to install essentially the pip install virtual env package, so the package for creating virtual environments. We're not going to create the virtual environment yet, we just want to install the package. So we can say sudo space apt -get install Python 3 -venv. Okay, so sudo apt -get install Python 3 -venv, so we can go ahead and install the Python virtual environment package. Not set it up, just install the package. And you can press enter. Perfect. And you now want to press yes for Y. And it's going to install that package for us. And again, we'll get a prompt and we can just press enter again on our keyboard. And there we go. Great. Let's say clear. And the next thing that we want to do is we simply want to type in the following command, and that's going to be ls. Okay, so we can see we've got nothing here just yet, so let's carry on. Now what we can do is we can create our own virtual environment. So I'm going to say Python 3 space -m space, and I'm going to say venv, and I'm going to give my virtual environment a name. So I'm going to call it env for virtual environment, or environment. So now you're creating your own virtual environment now. So previously we installed the package, now we're actually going to use that package and create our own virtual environment. So once you're happy with that, you can press enter. Okay. So we'll just take a moment, there we go. Now let's activate our virtual environment. So we're going to say source env/bin/activate. So go ahead and enter in the following commands, and we're going to activate our virtual environment. There we go. So you can now see here on the left that our virtual environment is now active and that we are within it. So while we're within it, we can install our Django package. So we can say pip3 install Django. There we go. So it's installing Django and all the sub packages associated with it. Perfect. Let's type clear. There we go. Now we want to clone our Django project. So I have my sample application here that I want to go ahead and clone. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to type git clone. And I'm going to copy my project here, the URL, copy. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to say paste. Then next to it, I just want to put at the end .git and space. So I'm going to say git clone. I copied my URL from my project, and then I just entered on at the end of it .git at the end. So I'm going to clone my Django project right here. So once you're happy with that, go ahead and press enter. So it's cloning the project. There we go. Perfect. Right, so let's go ahead and type in ls. And now we can see we have our virtual environment and we have our Django project here. Perfect. So let's clear this up. Okay, so let's make it clearer here for you guys. So the next thing we need to do is install Nginx. So I'm going to say sudo apt get install y Nginx. So this command is going to allow us to install Nginx on our system. So sudo apt get install -y Nginx. Okay, so let's install Nginx. Perfect. Okay, so you'll see this prompt again. Just press enter again. There we go. So I just want to close that. Right, there we go. All right, so now what we can do is type in clear. And there we go, right at the top. Okay, so let's just clear this up a bit here. Let's make it a bit clearer for you guys. Okay, so what we want to do now is we want to install Gunicorn. Now, Gunicorn is used for allowing our Django application to communicate with our web server and hence bridge the connection. So we can say pip install Gunicorn. Or, I don't know how it's actually pronounced, but there we have it. Gunicorn has been installed. And if you want to validate this, you can type in pip list. So as long as you're in your virtual environment, if you type in pip list, you'll be able to see here all the packages that are installed in your virtual environment. So it's a good validation method here. All right. Okay, so what we can essentially do next is we can connect to our EC2 instance's IPv4 address. So that's the next thing we want to go ahead and do. Right, now to do this, you can head on back to the previous tab. And here under public IP address, you can copy that. And you can just paste it in your URL and press enter. And there we go. We can now see that Nginx has been installed on our system. Perfect. So we can now see it's all set and ready to go. Let's head over back to EC2 Instance Connect. And the next thing that we want to do is we want to install and set up Supervisor. Now, Supervisor is going to ensure that our application keeps on running smoothly in the background. So let's go ahead and install Supervisor. So to do that, you want to type in sudo apt-get install Supervisor. Okay, so sudo apt-get install Supervisor and press enter. Okay, you get the prompt again, just press enter. And let's type in clear and clear this up. There we go. All right, so next we will go ahead and create a configuration file that will allow Supervisor to carry out its processes effectively. So to do that, we first need to head over to the Supervisor directory as follows. So that will be at cd/etc/supervisor/conf.d/. So pay note of the following command. So cd /etc/supervisor/conf.d/ and press enter. Great. So now within that directory, we can go ahead and create our Gunicorn configuration file. So to do that, you need to say sudo touch Gunicorn or Gunicorn.conf. And that will create that Gunicorn.conf file for us. And in order to edit or modify our configuration file, we can then make use of the nano command. So we can say sudo nano Gunicorn.conf and enter. So here we are within our Gunicorn file here, our Gunicorn.conf file. So what we need to do is edit this configuration file. So what I'm going to do is pin the code in the description. No, I'll pin the code in the comments section below. And you can simply copy and modify the code according to your project. The only thing that you'll need to do is you're going to have to modify your project name. So I have my project here. So this is my GUnicorn file here. And I will zoom in here for you and explain a bit. Okay, so this is our GUnicorn file here that we need to configure. Now, the only difference is as follows. So my project name is called Elevate. So let's head over here. So my project is called Elevate, as you can see. And I configure Elevate here. And I configure it here as well. So that's for my project. So obviously these two parts here, you need to change with your own project name. So if I can zoom in even more, yeah, you need to change these up here. And the next thing you need to make sure you change here is this part here. So we need to say how we are connecting our Django application to our web server. We're connecting it with GUnicorn, and we need to specify in our GUnicorn file where that connection is coming from in our Django app. So here it's from elevate.wsgi. Now you're probably wondering, where do I confirm this? Now usually it will be your project, but if you want confirmation, head over to your project settings.py file. So I'm heading over to the settings.py file, and you want to look for WSGI. So here's WSGI, and here you can see, if I zoom in a bit here, you can see here mine is elevate.wsgi, and that's going to correlate to whatever your GUnicorn is here. So you have three things you need to change. So wherever you see elevate here, you need to put in your project instead. Everything else needs to be exactly the same, because what we're essentially configuring here is a few workers to organize GUnicorn and start up the process, to allow supervisor to auto start, auto restart, and also to configure logging files if there are errors or any kind of issues as well. So that's essentially what's going on here. So like I said, I will attach this to the comment section below, so you can go ahead and just modify it. So I'm just going to copy this here, and I'm going to head over to my GUnicorn file here, and I'm going to right click and say paste. There we go. So it's all in place. Now you're probably wondering, how do I save this? So to save it, you just need to say Control and O. So once you say Control O, it's going to say file name to write gunicorn.conf. That's perfect. You can just go ahead and press enter. There we go. So it's been saved. Now the only thing you need to do now is you need to exit from here. So you can just say Control, hold Control, and say X. And there you go. Now, if you want to go back in there, you can say sudo nano gunicorn.conf, and you're back in there. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So what you can do now is you can just go ahead and say Control X, and you're out. Okay, so just remember those commands. Perfect. The next thing we need to do is create a log directory now, which is going to append those files that we saw in GUnicorn to alert us of errors, or if we have any errors or any issues. So we can just create a directory here. We're going to say sudo mkdir, which means make directory, space var /log/GUnicorn. Okay, so you want to go ahead and add in the following right there. So sudo make directory /var /log/GUnicorn. And once you're happy, you can press enter. Perfect. We must then tell supervisor to read from our configuration file, so from our GUnicorn file. So we can do this by saying sudo supervisor, and we need to type in ctl. So remember, supervisor ctl space reread. And we can now see that GUni is available, so GUnicorn file is available. Now what you can do is you can go ahead and tell supervisor now to start GUnicorn in the background. So to do this, you can say sudo supervisor ctl, and you can go ahead and say update. Okay, and go ahead and say update. There we go. So now it's added a process group for us. Now we want to check the status and see if everything's running properly and without any problems. Now to do that, you need to say sudo supervisor ctl, and you want to say status. And there we go. We can now see it's running. Make sure that you don't see starting or back off or failure. That usually indicates that you've configured your Nginx file wrong. So make sure that you see running. And you can go ahead and type it again if you want. So sudo supervisor ctl status. And it's running. Great, and you can see the uptime. Perfect. So you've got everything configured here for your nginx.conf file. Perfect, well done. So let's clear this up. And we can go ahead and move on to the next set of steps. Right, so the next thing we need to do is cd out of our current directory until we are within this etc directory here. So we're in etc supervisor conf.d, we're in this directory, and we just want to go out of it until we are in the etc part. So we can type cd and add a space, and we can say point or dot. Okay, so now we're in supervisor. Let's go back one more level. So cd space dot. And there we go. We are now in etc. All right, let's type clear and make sure you're in the following directory here. Perfect. Now we want to type ls. Okay, so that gives us a lot of directories here. Now we want to head over to the Nginx directory. As you can see here on my screen, we want to head over to Nginx. So here at the bottom, let's just clear this for the moment. And now that we know we want to go to Nginx, we can say cd nginx. Perfect. Now let's type ls and reveal the files. Okay, so this is a bit clearer. We want to edit the nginx.conf file. So we want to edit our Nginx configuration settings. And to do that, we can just say sudo nano nginx.conf. So remember, nano is for editing or modifying a file, and we want to edit or modify nginx.conf. Go ahead and press enter. Great, and the only thing we want to do here is we want to edit the user. So as of this moment, the user is www-data. This is incorrect. We can just say root. So I'm going to go ahead and just backspace all of that and say root. Okay, that's perfectly fine. Okay, we can just say root. You can of course configure this to another user if you wish. I just feel root is a good way to go. So there are many ways to do it. This isn't just the one way. Remember, you can reference to other names if you wish, but I just want to keep it brief and simple for you guys. Okay, so that's perfectly fine. So remember, if we want to edit a file, we need to press Control and O. Now it's going to say file name to write, nginx.conf. Perfect. Go ahead and press enter. Saved. Now we can go ahead and press Control and X at the same time. And there we go. So we've configured now our Nginx conf file. And the reason we added that user to be the root user is because we don't want to have any permission denied errors. So we need to go ahead and set a user with permissions. And by default, the root user will have complete permissions. So we won't have any issues once we go ahead and make additional changes and settings. All right. We can now type clear. And then we can just press enter. And there we go. Perfect. Next, we need to create a configuration file for our Django application within the sites available directory. Now, if we type ls in again, we can now see we have this sites available directory here. So we just want to cd into that directory. So we can just say cd sites-available. So make sure you spell it correctly here and go ahead and click on that. Perfect. Now we can just go ahead and create our configuration file known as our Django.conf and then modify it with nano. So let's create that Django configuration file. So we can just type in sudo touch Django.conf, create that file. Perfect. Now let's say sudo nano Django.conf, and now we're going to modify it or edit that file per se. Perfect. Now, yet again, I do have a Django.conf configuration here. So it's going to be very simple. Okay, let me zoom in for you here. Now, don't worry, I'll also put this in the comment section of this video. So this will be roughly the Django.conf configuration file that you'll use, so Django.conf. So the only thing you need to add in here is your server name. And of course, you need to just put in your project name here. So mine is called Elevate. Okay, so as you can see here, and my project is Elevate, or the project name per se. Great, so let me just modify my settings in here. So I need to get my server name. So in this case, we're just going to use our public IPv4 address here. I'm going to copy that, Okay, and I'm just going to head into django.conf and paste the server name here. Perfect. And that's all I really need. That's pretty much just about it. So let's go ahead and copy all of this. Head over to EC2 Connect, and here is the folder. So this will be django.conf. Right click, say paste. And you may want to scroll up, and there we have it, all in place. So essentially what's going to happen now is we'll be able to connect to our Django application, okay, on port 80, and the server name, well, technically our IPv4 address, we're going to be connecting right here, okay. So make sure you've got that in place. Now, technically, if you wanted to make use of HTTPS, technically you would listen on port 443, and server name, you put in your domain name, such as www or your website.com, etc. So just keep that in mind. But we would just want to keep something simple here so we don't overdo it. So that's all you need to do. And once you're happy with that, you can press Control O at the same time. And we want to write file name to write django.conf. Yes, you can press enter. And what you can do now is you can go ahead and just press Control X. And there we go. If you want to double check your configuration, head back over to sudo nano django.conf. And you can just have a look at your configuration, see if you're happy with it. Like I said, don't worry, I will attach the necessary code in the comments down below, so don't worry. Okay, so once you're happy with that, Control X out, and there we go. So now you can just say clear. Perfect. So we've got everything set and ready to go there. The next thing we need to do is actually test our configuration. We want to make sure that everything is working as it should. So to do that, you can type in sudo nginx-t. All right, so we can see here our nginx, our nginx.conf or nginx configuration file, syntax is okay, perfect. And we can also see that the test also was successful of this nginx.conf file. Perfect. So what we want to do now is go ahead and run the following command. So that will be sudo ln, okay, django.conf, okay, and you can go ahead and add a space, and then you want to say etc nginx/sites -enabled. So essentially what we're doing here is we are going ahead and enabling our site. We want to get our site live. So we're just putting the final command in place. And you can go ahead and just press enter. So sudo ln django.conf space /etc /nginx/sites enabled. And you can go ahead and press enter. Perfect. Now the last thing you want to do is say sudo service nginx restart. So you just want to restart the service, get everything ready and set and ready to go. And once you're done with that, you can go ahead and refresh your page. And there we go. So this is my application, a very simple one, and we can see we're connecting to the following IPv4 address. And there we go. We've successfully deployed our application with Nginx G-Unicorn, and we've also used the supervisor service in the background to keep it running. Now, a question I got in the comments on my last deployment to Amazon EC2 was the fact that they wanted their application to keep on running. So in this case, because we made use of G-Unicorn, Nginx, and Supervisor especially, that allows us to technically go ahead and close this EC2 Instance Connect console. We don't need to keep this running anymore. So if I were to close this console here, okay, and let me just head over to my instances page here, for example. And what you'll notice is, let's just wait for it to refresh here. If we head on back, we can see our application is still live. It's not breaking or anything because we have processes running in the background thanks to Supervisor. So that is something that we configured early on. But yeah, that's it, guys. That is a simple way in which you can deploy your Django web application with Nginx, G-Unicorn, and make use of Supervisor to just keep your application running, even though that you are not within your application itself, within the, how can I call it, you're not keeping it manually up and running. It is running in the background with all the processes. Okay, of course, if you delete your instance, your website will be down, but that's kind of common sense. But the point is, you don't need to keep your terminal running based on a command. It will automatically run for you, so you don't need to worry about that. Okay, guys, so that's it on deployment on Amazon EC2 with Nginx and G-Unicorn. So I hope to help you. And of course, there's a lot more things you can do. Of course, you can go ahead and add in inbound rules for HTTPS, and you may need to configure a few things, register your domain name, but this at least will give you a good entry point. All you really need to do if you want to connect a domain name is you just need to change your server name to your domain name, change your port to port 443 usually, and you should be good to go. Of course, there will be probably a few more things you need to add and manipulate, but I'm sure you guys can figure that out. But anyway, this is it, guys, and of course, as always, thank you for the support, and until next time.